Welcome to Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Hodder Education. I am James Nalfos and I will be your moderator. I hope you enjoy listening to some of the excerpts of Hodder Caribbean Classics. Do not hesitate to get a copy of your favorite Hodder text. The novel entitled Green Days by the River was written by Trinidadian author Michael Anthony. 15-year-old Shelley is the newborn in the village and quite a catch as far as the village girls are concerned. But he is focused on becoming a man in the wake of his father's terminal illness. Shell's entry into the village does not go unnoticed by either adults or his peers. Mr. Gidari, the most prominent resident in Cedar Grove, is especially interested in Shell as he sees him as a potential son-in-law. He presents his beautiful half-Indian daughter Rosalie, and Shell is captivated. An excerpt of this novel we read by Dr. Sharon Belmar George. Dr. Belmar George, the Chief Medical Officer at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, has served as a Chief Technical Officer in the management of COVID-19 in St. Lucia. She serves as a Deputy Chair in the Command Center who provides health-related recommendations to Cabinet in relation to COVID-19. She is a wife of an airline captain and a mother of a 12-year-old twin boy and girl, Dominic and Ava Marie. She enjoys family life and finds tranquility in a thriving flower garden.
Dr. Sharon Belmar George, reading Green Days by the River by Michael Anthony. We had the Pilar party and there was a lot of fun and singing, and it was far into the night before the party broke up. The girls had returned from their walk just before nightfall, and we had heard the steel bands coming out to serenade, but we did not go out to watch. Freddie had got a few more of the boys to come to the party, and with everybody bringing along something, we had more to eat and drink than we could manage. Teresa had taken charge of the cook-up. The girls were very merry, but there was not what Joe had been expecting. At least not as far as I know. For I did not know how the party ended. When I awoke on Boxing morning, I realized what had happened and could hardly face my parents. My father was very amused, but my mother was fuming cross. "You know you ain't have no head for rum," she said. "When you go out, God's sake, don't drink." I remained quiet. My father said, "Let the boys strive. This is Christmas." "Yes, but he can't drink at all. And when this sort of thing happen, well, you don't know what could happen to him. I really getting frightened for him." Neither I nor my father spoke, and my mother said, "With this boy, what's his name, Freddie? With Freddie, I don't mind so much, because he seem all right. But you never know who you'll be drinking with. You're talking as if this boy is a drinker. He only having a good time because it's Christmas. That's all." "Well, I only hope so," my mother said. All this while she was talking, she was out in the kitchen. It was broad daylight, and I had just opened my eyes, and I found I had been sleeping on the little bed. My father had again slept in the bedroom, and now he was already up and changed and out in the sitting room. I wanted to ask him who had brought me home, but I did not. I was feeling awful. I had a bad headache, and it was as if there was a typhoon inside my guts. Since my mother had mentioned Freddie, I guess it was Freddie who had brought me home last night. I had been so determined not to get drunk, and that was what had happened. I halfway sat up on the little bed, and I was feeling deep remorse. "Want a little coffee?" my father said. I looked up at him. I saw he was watching me closely. "Yes, Pa, please." He told my mother. She was in the kitchen, and I could tell from the smell of frying ham that she was getting my breakfast ready. I had a fitful sleep, and my eyes were feeling tight, so I sat up from my half-lying position and I felt a little dizzy, and I held my head. "You better take some Andrews," my father said. "No, I'm all right." "You take it." "All right." He took a glass from the cupboard and put some Andrews into it, and he poured some water from the goblet into the glass. The sudden brightness on my eyes made me wince a little, but after a moment I was all right. There was a stray dog lying on the side of the road just opposite me, with its mouth wide open, panting from the heat. While looking at the dog, I saw Mr. Prefat coming along. Mr. Prefat was one of the oldest men on Pier Hill, and he was so old that he was bent, and he was hobbling rather than walking. "Morning, Mr. Prefat." "Morning. You had a nice Christmas?" "Not too bad, no, not too bad, son, thank you." I watched him go by with his stick and his little hop and drop walk. I looked out on the green trees and low-lying land between us and the high ground beyond. There was a cocoa house in the distance, and it was already open, with the beans exposed for drying. Normally there would be people dancing the cocoa to prevent the beans drying in clumps. No one was dancing the cocoa today. "Come on if you're hungry," my mother said. She had brought my breakfast in, and I went to the table. My father, for the want of doing something, was shining his shoes, but now he stopped to look at me again. "Still feeling bad?" "Yes." "Well, eat and go back and lie down." I was just not feeling hungry anymore. Maybe the trouble was I had not slept enough. I was feeling very vomity without the vomit even coming near. It was a long time since I had felt this way. I drank up the coffee and left everything else and went and lay down. I slept right through until the late afternoon of this Boxing Day. My father was in the house when I woke up, but my mother was out. Of course, my father could not possibly go anywhere. My mother, who had not left the front door since Christmas Eve, had gone down the beach to Radix to see an old friend. As I looked out of the front door, I could see that the day was just about finished. There was darkness between the leaves of the trees, and now only the houses on the top of the hill, far on the other side, was in light. On Pier Hill, a few lamps were already lit. I could see them flickering through the windows of the houses. I was trying to listen to see if any music was coming from the government school, for there was a Boxing Day annual Christmas tree dinner and dance for old folk being held there. Sometimes, if the wind was right, you could hear if there was music in the school, but now I could hear nothing. In the house, the shadows were turning to gloom, so I went and lit the lamp. Pa was half dozing on the chair. As I lit the lamp, he raised his head and he said, "Oh, night already? How you feeling now, boy?" "Fine, Pa, good. You eat yet?" "Not yet, but I feel as if I could eat a lion." "We cooked a small one," I laughed. "I never see a man to sleep like you." Feeling revived now, though, I went again and looked out at the front door. "Go and eat," Pa said. I did not say anything, and my heart was thumping, for as I looked out through the front door, Rosalie Goodharry was standing right there in the road. Seeing me, she smiled and walked away a little. I said, "Now, Pa, I'll come back in a minute, eh?" I went out into the road. When I got back into the house, it was very late. My mother had already returned and I was in bed. I sneaked in, and seeing that Pa was not on the little bed, I was relieved and I lay down there to sleep. Having slept all day, sleep would not come to my eyes now, and I kept thinking about Rosalie. I could not get her out of my mind. I lay face down and my heart was thumping against the mattress. After a while, I got up and crept softly to the cupboard and poured myself a huge drink of rum. I was hoping to knock myself out so I could get to sleep and forget. I was terrified as to what could happen. Both Rosalie and myself were stark staring mad. I asked myself why in the name of reason I was so crazy. My father had warned me about this thing. I was wild and furious with myself. Then Joan came to mind. Just next week Joan was coming. I had told Joan so many nice things in letters and was writing to her every night. And now this. Hell, I thought. I felt like knocking my head against a partition. And then I began to slide into a dizziness, and slowly it became as though my mind was being transported. A wave of careless feeling and pleasure began to engulf me. I knew I was growing drunk from the rum. I started remembering Rosalie now and thinking of her with ecstasy. I wrested myself from this thought and tried to clear my head by sitting up. I opened the door a little, but the night was pitch black. Suddenly my head seemed to reel and I was flat on my back again. It must have been shortly after this that the rum knocked me flat. When Old Year's Day came, I went to that place at the back of the house, which we just called the back. I walked through the bit of scrubland behind the house and downhill to the ravine, and I crossed the ravine and went up the hill to where the big cinnamon tree was. There were a number of coconut trees around, some short and easy to climb, but I did not come here for watternuts now. The hill was covered with long grass that lay on the surface and was not prickly, and I had always liked to come and sit there. From here you could not see much of the village for the trees, but looking towards the sea, there would be that cloudy fringe of coconut trees, and above it a strip of the blue sky. At times, you could see white foam running across the blue. Now I thought of these things quite absently. I had come here because I could not bear to stay around the house while the hours crept on so slowly. I had never been so nervous as this before. Joan was just arriving at 6 this evening. I had already written to let her know the position at home. She would have to sleep with my mother as we had no extra bed and no extra room. I had felt a little embarrassed about that, but she had written back to say she did not mind one bit. It was as long ago as August that I had last seen her, and I was quite anxious to see her again. I was amazed that her mother had trusted us so much that she was allowing Joan to come for a few days. True, her mother had written to Ma about it, and it was all very official, but I did not expect they'd be so brave. It was clear that they had a great deal of confidence in her, much more than I had in myself. The sun was filtering through the leaves of the coconut trees and making patterns on the ground. A great part of the slopes was in the sun. At the foot of the slopes was a ridge of shadow cast by the bamboo patch. When he had come to Pier Hill, I used to come here on the coconut branch and slide down the slippery grass right down to the bottom to the edge of the bamboo patch. Even now, I did this sometimes, although I was 15 and with hairs on my chest. I sat with my knees drawn up to my chin and looked at the sun bright on the trees and on the grass. From here, the bamboo patch looked dark and damp looking, but on the top of it, the young fine leaves were silvery in the sun. Here, under the cinnamon tree, the place was cool and heavily shadowed. Above the trees, before and below me, I could see only a few housetops, and the atmosphere was very calm, and I was thinking how beautiful everything was on this, the last day of the year. My shirt was unbuttoned, and I was half-consciously playing with the hairs on my chest. Then I suddenly thought of Rosalie, and I became a little frightened about her. Lately I had been thinking of Joan so much that I had almost forgotten what had happened. I tried to chase things from my mind now. 6 o'clock seemed as far away as eternity. It was only 11 now, yet 6 would come. Yet it would be afternoon and then evening. I began feeling nervous. Joan would soon be here. Even since I'd sat here in the sun and gone higher over the bamboo patch, 6 o'clock would come all right. I got up to stretch my legs and I was looking up to the cinnamon tree. This was a very unusual kind of tree, for the leaves were not green but in the shades of brown and red, and its bark was rough and frayed and looking somewhat like Grenada spice. It had a strong spicy smell too. I started looking towards the village. Pier Hill proper was more bush than village from here, and there was not much to be seen. I looked across to the sea, and there was the broad blue strip in the distance, just on top of the green haze of plants. Green Mayaro, I said to myself, and I wondered if Joan would like this place. My heart was thumping for her.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Hodder Education. For more of this titled and many others, visit hoddereducation.co.uk. Stay tuned for our next episode. Please remain safe and set aside time to engage in reading. I am Jameson Alphos, saying goodbye for now.